skin, so gorgeous. We thank the life gorgeous. Thank the life gorgeous. I love the life gorgeous. Its torso is so tight.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Life Gorgeous. My name is Craig Kilborn. This is where I share my magical life in hopes of improving your life. And once again, another special podcast experience. I'm a Wolves fan, and we're going hard on the Wolves. Today, my old friend who is on the broadcast team, former NBA player, Jim Petersen. Let's say hello to Jim. Hey, buddy.
Hey, Craig, how's it going, buddy?
Good. So just to let the people know, we're recording the day after the Lakers beat the Wolves in overtime. That means the Wolves will play Friday at home against the winner of OKC or New Orleans. So we don't know if they're in the playoffs. I think they might be. I'm not sure. But before we get to that, what's that?
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. I think they're gonna. There's something special about this team. We'll get into that. I want to start with you. So you were a year ahead of me. I've known you for years. I think we played summer league against each other once. But you were a McDonald's All-American at St. Louis Park. I grew up down at Hastings. And first, tell me, because I don't remember this, how many guys are McDonald's All-Americans? Is it 25 or 50? Or I thought it was not that many, right?
No, it's two teams of 12, so it's 24 guys.
Wow.
Yeah. And, there have been All-Americans from Minnesota in the past. In fact, my dad was a high school All-American back in 1951.
Oh, wow.
He played in the North-South high school All-American game, and he was on the North team, of course, and Bob Pettit was on the South.
Really? That guy could, he could shoot. He could shoot.
If you could see the pictures from these two teams, I mean, both teams all white. It was a different back then. My dad went to Louisville and, played on an all white team there. And so it was a different era. But yeah, I say that to say that there have been high school All-Americans from Minnesota, but the McDonald's All-American game didn't start until like 77.
Oh, okay.
78 in there somewhere. But I'm the first one from Minnesota.
That's what because I was thinking about it. You had, I have some names written down. I think you had a really solid NBA career, and of the high school guys from Minnesota, we had a bunch of big men. I'm not going back. I didn't know Vern Mickelson. I was from Minnesota. I know he played for the Lakers, but in the 70s, we had Kevin McHale, we had Mark Landsberger, Randy Brewer, Mark Olberding, and yourself. Those are the guys I remember who played professionally. And you obviously lived a dream that a lot of us didn't. First of all, was it the greatest experience of your life playing in the NBA?
There's no question. I mean, the thing about it for me that it was pretty much unexpected. I was McDonald's All-American and I followed Kevin McHale. So I don't know if you mentioned Randy Brewer in there. He was a pretty good player too. Yeah. That's from Lake City. And so, my career at Minnesota was just average. I had some good seasons. I had a good senior year, and I don't think anybody expected me to play in the NBA. And in order to get to the NBA, it really does take a village of people to help you get there. And I had people that took me under the wing. Do you remember Jimmy Williams, who was at the University of Minnesota? He
was in my living room with Jim Dutcher. They were recruiting me. And I ended up going to Montana State to kind of ride the bench there. But I remember Jimmy. He was great.
So, I mean, it's guys like Jimmy Williams and my buddy Vinny Harris, Vinny's, from New Jersey originally, but he was one of these guys that, comes into your life, and he believed in me at when I was a senior at University of Minnesota, and he worked with me and believed in me. And it was guys like my agent, Bob Stein, who's, was a great athlete at St. Louis Park High School, was an All-American at the University of Minnesota, played tight end and played for the Kansas City Chiefs. But guys like Bob Stein and Saul Brandis, who's the first strength coach with the Timberwolves, helped me, get stronger for the NBA draft. And Seriously, like Craig, like it was pretty unbelievable that I ended up making it. And so often too, like, when you get drafted, you have to get drafted to the right team. And so
Yeah.
I was drafted by the Houston Rockets in 1984. So I was in the Michael Jordan draft, but of course, Hakeem Olajuwon was drafted number 1. And that's where I ended up going. I ended up going to Houston. And so I was number 51. So Dream was 1. I was 51. I was third round. I was a third round pick at that time because in that era, they had 10 rounds of drafting, and
yep.
There were only 23 teams too. So I would have been a second rounder now because there are 30 teams. But then it was 10 rounds, and I was a third round draft pick, which, in that era with only 23 teams, third rounders didn't make it to the league. So I was pretty lucky.
Well, I just remember we were all proud of you and all the Minnesotans. We didn't know, McHale was going to be that great of a pro. Michael Thompson was a better college player. Then I see Kevin McHale for the Celtics guarding Dr. J in the playoffs. He guarded a lot of different people. And then I saw you in the finals guarding McHale with your forearm on him. Was that a thrill for you?
I had a lot of thrills. I know that you and I share a love for Julius Erving.
Oh,
because he was the guy. He was the guy that was my hero growing up. I had the Dr. J, the classic, Dr. J poster in my bedroom, and I just loved Doc. I loved him when he played for the Nets. I loved him when he played for the Squires. I loved him when he played for the Sixers, and I'll just never forget. Like, just when you first go on the court, this is the thing that is the mind bender. And I think it's kind of different now for guys because there's so much intertwined sort of relationships between players and AAU teams. Players are expected to come in the league now right out of high school. There was this huge chasm between high school, and you had to run the gauntlet of 4 years of college when we came up, Craig. But these guys are right there ready to step in. And so whether it's through their agencies or whether their relationships through this band of brothers that is the AAU program right now, guys are really close to other NBA players. But when I was coming up and we were coming up, there was this huge chasm. The idea of me playing against Julius Erving was an unbelievable experience. So over my shoulder right here, I have it's one of my prized possessions. It's an actual pair of Dr. J shoes.
The Converse.
And they have the Converse with the little Dr. J logo on them. And I got them when I was playing for the Houston Rockets. Doc had a pair of shoes in every NBA arena because his shoes used to get stolen all the time. So he had a pair in every arena, and I grabbed the pair that was in the Rockets arena. But my first game I played against Artis Gilmore was my first game.
The A train.
My second game in the pros was an exhibition game against the Boston Celtics. And so now I'm on the court with Larry Bird and Kevin McHale. And Cedric Maxwell, Cornbread, is the guy he's the radio analyst for the Celtics now. We were teammates in Houston too. Right. But this is my second exhibition game, and I'm on the court guarding McHale, and I'm down at the Celtics bench end, and Cedric Maxwell is saying, "Peterson, who's Peterson? Someone get me a program. I need a program." And so, the heckling kind of started right away, and you get to the reality that you're playing against these guys, and you got to forget about the star quality, because the star part of it, has to go away quickly. You're going to compete.
I was playing summer league at Augsburg, and McHale showed up after his rookie year with the Celtics. He was on the other team. And I drove down in the half court. I drove from the right side down the middle, and he was there. And I went up and under him, and it rolled off the rim. And I was ecstatic. I got the shot off, but it didn't go in. But the crowd kind of oohed a little bit. But he's great. It's just amazing the career he had. I wanted to ask you about a guy that I didn't see much, but I thought he was really mobile. He was Mark Olberding. He moved well. I know they called him the baby bull, but he was quick on his feet, and I didn't really see him play. And I think he played 1 year at Minnesota and then went to the San Diego Sails or somewhere in the ABA. And I remember he had like 21 points and 10 boards in his first game. My dad goes, "That's not a very good league. He's guy's a rookie and he's, the ABA." But what did you remember about Mark Olberding?
So the first time I ever saw Mark Oberding, I'm sitting in the living room with my folks and we're watching the state tournament. I think it was the 1974 state tournament when Melrose, I think they beat, I forget who they beat actually. It was Class A. So I just remember how big he was. It was a huge individual. And, Flip played with Mark Oberding and so did Michael Thompson. Those all came kind of together. Was there. So Michael is a dear friend of mine, because, you're out there on the West Coast. So, Michael, what a great job he does with the Lakers right now. But Michael was my hero growing up. I wore 43 in the NBA.
So did I.
Of Michael Thompson.
I wore 43 because of Michael Thompson. Yep. Bells. We called him Bells.
Bells. Yeah. Everybody called him Bells. Actually, you want to know something? Michael actually doesn't like being called Bells. His brother, Andy, no, I still call him Bells. Everybody still calls him Bells. I don't listen to him. The only reason he says he doesn't want to be called Bells is because Walt Bellamy is Bells. And he thinks it's disrespectful to Walt Bellamy. But I said, Michael, you're Bells. You're Bells for a different reason. And so you have to because everybody's calling you Bells. No one's going to stop doing that. But with Dinger, though, he's another guy that was a guy that I played against in the NBA, and it was a great thing to be able to take and meet your heroes, and then they become your friend. And so, and I'm sure you've done that in your business too, Craig, where you've been around a lot of famous people, and working at Sports Center, you met everybody, and it's sort of. It's weird, but it becomes normal in a way. You stop being starstruck at some point, but I still really value every time I sit with Michael Thompson and every time I'm with him, I think of him as a friend, and I'm not in awe of Michael that way anymore. Right. But I still really cherish the fact that I had that he was the guy that kind of made me dream of being an NBA player, and he's one of the reasons. I got a picture with me and Michael. When I'm in 9th grade, and he came over and spoke and worked at our basketball camp when I was at St. Louis Park High School playing for Augie Schmidt. But Bells came over, and it's like he breaks down those kind of experiences break down barriers, and they're really important. That's why anytime you can impact a kid just by going over to say hello to him and stuff like that, it makes him feel bigger.
Yeah, I worked after my senior year at Hastings before I went to Montana State. I was a counselor at the Michael Thompson basketball camp at McAllister College. And I just remembered Dr. Jack Ramsey, his coach at Portland, came in to speak. And I talked to Coach, just off court. I was just talking to him. And I just remember I said, I've always loved the NBA, and I just don't watch college hoops. And he goes, "It's like watching ants, make an ant mound, or watching paint dry." Like Dr. Jack was criticizing the college game, which obviously it's special, but I was so obsessed with the NBA, and I just said, these are the best players. A lot of college guys can't make it, but it was just funny that he criticized the college game. But do you watch college hoops, or is it too much NBA for you? Because I don't have time to watch college hoops.
I don't have time to watch it either. Even the NCAA tournament doesn't really, do much for me anymore. But I got to say that I don't know if this is just, it's like in our era kind of thinking, but really, it really is true that in our era, in the 80s and 90s of college basketball, when guys didn't go one and done, once Kevin Garnett went and started doing, Kobe and Tracy McGrady, the floodgates opened of going straight from high school to the NBA, and guys stopped going to school. But in the 80s and 90s, think about some of those great North Carolina, Georgetown matchups in Kansas and UCLA, and when guys were staying 3 and 4 years, and college teams were like pro teams back then.
Yeah.
They really were. Think about Chris Mullen's St. John's teams with Walter Berry and Bill Wennington. And all of these, they'd have 3-4 pros on their team, and they'd stay together for 3 or 4 years. And the college teams, I think college basketball was way more compelling when you had the classic Big East, the classic ACC, the classic Big Ten, Pac-10 or Pac-12, whatever. The Southwest Conference. Phi Slamma Jamma, those Houston teams back in the 80s. I just think that it's kind of sad that we don't see these kids play together 3 or 4 years to be able to learn how to become a leader. Because that's one thing in the NBA is that you've got all these young teams now and all these kids that really haven't had to climb the ladder of success and pay their dues like we had to. And so from that standpoint, like I just think college basketball isn't as interesting as it used to be. Plus the rules are terrible. Yeah. I mean, all of especially the late game stuff. I think the women's game in college has done a better job of modernizing their game because the women in college, they went to 4 quarters. And you can also advance the basketball end of game situation in the women's game. The fact that if you've got 1.2 left on the clock on a late game situation in the men's game, and you've got to take it out from the baseline, it just ruins any kind of drama. You know what I mean? They need to change that rule. They need to change, if they change college basketball a little bit. And, one thing that happened in the collective bargaining agreement, this last collective, they didn't make a provision to get rid of the one and done. So they left that in there. That's not going to be allowed. High school players are not going to be allowed to jump from high school to the NBA right now. So at least we have that. At least we're going to get 1 year where guys are either going to go to the G League and play for the Ignite, or they're going to, spend 1 year in college. So at least we're going to get that.
Before I wrap up the Minnesota high school stuff, why do you think we had so many good big men from Minnesota? Was something in the water? Just why is it that you had so many great big men that played in it professionally? The guys I mentioned and yourself. Okay,
so I think McHale is. I forget if McHale is Croatian or Serbian. He's from Yugoslavian descent, but I mean all the European blood that's up here. I mean I'm. My dad is Petersen, S-E-N, is Danish, and my grandmother on her side was Swedish, so Danish, Swedish on my dad's side, and my mom was German. So they grew up in a German farming community down in southern Minnesota, in Nicollet, Minnesota. So I just think the Scandinavian European blood, like there's, I think there's something to that. But the big men, but I'll tell you what. Minnesota's become a hotbed of talent for all positions now. I mean, think about Chet Holmgren, right? What he means, and the Jones brothers, Trey and Tyus Jones, and Khalid El Amin kind of started it back in '97. So I was the first McDonald's All-American in 1980. There wasn't another one until Khalid became a high school American in 1997. So think about that. Wow. 17 years.
That's crazy.
And there were a lot of great players at Minnesota. I think that Minnesota did itself a disservice by not starting AAU soon enough. I didn't play AAU. You didn't play AAU.
No,
right? You didn't play. And so like, here's something interesting. And it always kind of like bugged me. I was invited to 5-star camp out in Pennsylvania. And do you remember 5-star camp? Howard Garfinkel, the great 5-star camp. Everybody went to 5-star back then. But I couldn't go to 5-star because Minnesota had state high school rules that wouldn't allow us to go to basketball camps out of state. And then I couldn't play on any teams outside of the state either, or else you'd be ineligible. And we didn't have AAU. And so when I went to the McDonald's All-American game in 1980, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know a single other player. I'd never met any of them, didn't know any of them, but they knew each other. And so it was almost like the state of Minnesota, like it was a competitive disadvantage because of the rules that they had back at that time. So I think it stunted Minnesota, but now it's wide open and there's a lot of great players in the state.
That's great. Let's switch to our beloved Timberwolves. How many years have you been broadcasting there? And living through some misery and now a glorious time, actually, in my opinion. It's a wonderful time. But how many years have you been there?
This is my 25th year. I can't believe it. It's gone. Yeah, I know. And, I've had a lot of broadcast partners and, Chad Hartman, that was my first broadcast partner. In fact, that's kind of when I really got to know you. When we would come to LA and you were in Los Angeles and you'd come to Laker and Clipper games and you'd come see me and Chad. And then the great Tom Hanneman, who,
nicest guy around. Nicest guy around.
Yeah. And, Tom passed away a couple of years ago, tragically, but we named our media room after him. So Tom still lives on through that. But through Chad and working with Sean Grandy, who does a great job with the Celtics right now,
Yep.
He's their radio play-by-play guy, along with Cedric Maxwell. I worked with Sean for a year, and then worked with Chad on radio. Worked with Hanny, and then Dave Benz came for 10 years, and now working with Grady. And I saw your interview with Michael Grady, and isn't he fantastic?
He's great. He's gifted with a voice, but he knows the game and he's very clever. So he's perfect. I hope he stays there. I hope the network doesn't pluck him up and stuff. I hope he stays there for a long time. He's great.
Well, I think that he could maybe upgrade the job and maybe get to one of the coasts and make more money, because some of these other teams, I mean, they just have more money to spend on their broadcasts.
Right.
I think that think about Ian Eagle. I mean, Ian's the everyday play-by-play guy for the Brooklyn Nets, and Ryan Ruocco does a great job with the Brooklyn Nets too, and he's on ESPN all the time. So, Mark Jones is the everyday guy for the Sacramento Kings. So you can be a national broadcaster and still do everyday work with a team. So, I hope Michael does stay. I think that I think one of the funny parts of your conversation with him was the weather here in Minnesota, and it certainly is an issue. But Minneapolis is a great town. It's a foodie town. There's a lot to do here. And the fact that he thought he could get through an NBA season, Craig, without a car, I said, Michael, this is not New York City. I mean, you can Uber places for sure, but I mean, this is a car town, and so
that's funny.
Yeah, but he's been a great addition though. He's got the pipes though, doesn't he?
Oh yeah. So I've told you this before, and I've said it in other broadcasts, but I want to say it for the fans listening to the podcast. I think you do a tremendous job. I mean, really good. Because you say exactly what I'm thinking, and you're not afraid to say it, which means criticizing people. That's a bad shot. No, Carl, you fouled. That's a foul, Carl. So I mean, you're not a homer, and you tell it like it is. I also think because you coached in the WNBA with the Lynx, that you there's a strategy that and you know the game, a student of the game. So I enjoy all your commentary. But you told me once, and you get in trouble with the players. Is that true? Is that true that you get in trouble with the players?
Well, I think it's sometimes it's the players, sometimes it's the coaches, and I think that we went into the desert for a long time, and it's difficult sometimes. We get frustrated because, and the one thing that I always wanted to do with our fans is I never wanted to sugarcoat things. So if I thought that a certain strategy or something wasn't working, I would just say that this isn't working. And so I don't know. Sometimes the honesty is what made our broadcast watchable, because people knew I wasn't blowing smoke. But at the same time, I think that nobody really likes criticism. I don't like criticism. I mean, you don't like criticism. Nobody likes that. But I think that the problem is that it's not so much when the players themselves hear it. I think it's when someone else, a friend, a relative, or whatever, hears what I'm saying on the TV, and then when they explain it back to the player, it's like a game of telephone, right? It's like what they say to the player isn't really what I said or meant, and it gets misconstrued. So I don't know. I stopped worrying about all that a long time ago. I think if you're going to do this job, and if you're going to and I'm doing it for the fans. I'm doing it for the fans because that's what it's really all about, is that I want to be as honest as possible so that they aren't just rolling their eyes and going, this guy's a homer. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So that's all. I just try to live that way.
Have any players said to you, hey, knock it off, or a coach say, what are you doing?
No, never. That's never happened.
Okay.
No. I think that here's the one thing about human nature, though, I think, is that, and this is kind of what I've told, and I talk to players too. I said, look, if you ever have a problem with anything I say, just please come and tell me. Don't talk behind my back, or don't be secretly angry and then avoid the situation or whatever. And so, but I think human nature wise, Craig, I think that if I said 100 things about somebody, And if 97 of them were positive and 3 of them were negative, most people, I think, would focus on the 3 negative things,
Yeah,
not the
I know.
7 positive.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think
a problem.
that's kind of human nature.
Yeah, that's not good. So when play is ragged and we're turning it over, somebody likes to say, "What in the world?"
What in the world's going on?
I mean, it's so funny. I love it when you say that. It makes me laugh because it's just like, what is going on? Is this professional basketball? I mean, you say that a lot, right?
Well, I just sometimes because I am a fan and because I want our team to win, and I'm from Minnesota, and I kind of had we had our birthright taken from us. The Lakers went from Minneapolis to Los Angeles, and that sort of we had our birthright from that taken from us. But so the Minnesota Timberwolves were conceived by people that are family to me. So Marvin Harv. So Bob Stein was my first agent, but Bob Stein was one of my first heroes. He went to the same high school I went to, and Bob Stein was my first agent. And then I had to give Bob Stein up because he became president of the Wolves, and his father-in-law was Marvin Wolfenson. And so I had known Marvin for years before the Timberwolves were even built. They had the Northwest Health Clubs, which now are Lifetime clubs. But so they built these they were the original health club developers. You know what I mean? Like there weren't these things back in the 60s and 70s really. And it started with tennis, but so I knew the owners of the Timberwolves. The guys that started this franchise were friends of mine. I would sit in Marvin Wolfenson's office when I was an NBA player, and we would sit there and shoot the breeze. And Jerry Noyce was the great tennis coach at the University of Minnesota. And all of a sudden, Ahmad Rashad would come in with Jerry Noyce. They'd be playing tennis over at Northwest, and they'd come in and we'd all be sitting in Marvin's office talking about, politics or money or whatever.
Right.
But Marvin would tell me, how to make money and how to save money when I was an NBA player. And then when they started the Timberwolves, I'm literally in Marvin's office, and there's a bunch of easels up in Marvin's office of all the different nicknames, the team names of the Timberwolves, what it could have been. And so I saw the first rendering of the Timberwolves logo, that old Shep.
Oh yeah.
The original Timberwolves logo. I mean, I saw basically the pencil drawing that the guy who won the contest of naming the team, I saw the original thing. So I'm invested in this team. I love Glenn Taylor. I love this team, and so I hope that comes out. I try not to be but I want my team to win.
Just a weird side note. You just reminded me of something when you talk about investments. When you're a rookie in the NBA, you're making crazy money. It's compared to normal people, you're making a lot of money. I also remember that's great, right? Or not? I mean, it's great, isn't it?
80 grand compared to what now?
I guess it's kind of average. I wonder here's what I remember. I was at Augsburg Summer League, and Olberding was in the ABA, and he was there at the Summer League, and he drove up in a Cadillac convertible with Texas plates. So what was the first car you bought when you were in the NBA? Maybe he was making good money because he jumped. He came out as a freshman, right? And he went to the ABA. The ABA was overpaying guys, right?
Yes, yeah. He did make good money. The first car I ever bought was a Chevy IROC Z28, a blue one with T-tops, and it was my first car. I don't know why I picked a Camaro. I could have picked really kind of any car in that vein, but it was a beautiful car, and I loved it, and it was mine, and it was new because I think my first car was like a '68 Skylark, piece of crap. It was awful. It was an awful vehicle, but no, it was great. So so the T-tops. My car got stolen in Houston probably about 3 times.
Oh my gosh.
And so, it was one of those things that it's what you do when you first get in the NBA, right? You got to buy a car, you got to buy, a suit or two, and you got yourself an apartment.
Yeah. That had to be fun. That had to be a blast. Even on $80K a year, that had to be fun. Okay, I'm gonna go a lot of Wolves questions for you. When you were playing for the Rockets, did you ever hit or pinch anybody in the huddle? Ralph Sampson. I'm talking more about what happened the other day with Rudy hitting slow-mo. Did anything? Were there fights going on? Because someone told me years ago in the 90s, David Robinson, I was talking to him off camera, and he said there were fights in practice. Are there a lot of fights among NBA players, teammates? Yeah,
it does happen. I got into a fight with Ralph Sampson. I got into a fight with LaSalle Thompson when I was in Sacramento. When you get super competitive, physical people, and basketball is a physical game, and you get competitive, it can get out of hand a little bit. So yeah, Ralph and I got into it. But the thing about it is that this is where, when it happened during the game, when the slow-mo and Rudy thing happened, because I've seen it so much, and you hear about it so much, guys just get over it. You know what I mean? Like Ralph and I fought, but we were, completely over it afterwards. We both knew what it was about. It was about competing, and he didn't like what I was doing, and I didn't like what he was doing, and it's a physical game. And sometimes you take it up a notch when things start getting competitive, and stuff happens. I think that the Draymond Green situation was a little bit different because, I mean, he went over and just cold cocked him. It wasn't one of those things where you square up and then you go at it because of what happened on the court. Yeah. This was an argument, and he went over and literally like just punched him in his face. That's a little bit different than what I'm talking about. That was a little bit different situation. But Craig, it happens all the time, and I think for the most part it's no big deal.
And you said that on the air. I was happy to hear it live during the game. You said they're going to get over this. That's behind them for the team, not for the fans who, go crazy. What the hell just happened? But I was a little surprised they suspended Rudy. I'm wondering if it was, he has the bad back and maybe it looks good to suspend him. But because we're recording the day after, I'll just tell you, I'll get your thoughts on that game. The Wolves had a really gutsy effort, and then undermanned. It's tragic what happened to Jaden McDaniels. The offense shut down Jim Pete in the fourth, and I do respect the Lakers defense. I really do. And Ant had a terrible game, and they really focused on him. What are your thoughts on the fourth quarter, and what would you say? What would you have done?
Well, I mean, it's one of the things. One of my mantras since Chris Finch has been hired is "In Finch we trust," and so I think that I just have a lot of respect for his coaching acumen. If you could sit there and watch practice and watch the things that he says and how he says them, and the way that he. Because you had him on your podcast too, so like what a great guy he is. Like personality wise, he's just a regular guy. He's got a great sense of humor. He's a wordsmith. He knows how to turn a phrase, and he knows how to communicate to players. And so he's cool most of the time. But it's so funny when you sit there and when he finally boils over because he's had enough because they're not doing what he's asking them to do. He gets on guys. So. I think some of it was, combinations of players on the court at the time. I think that it was a combination of guys being exhausted because of what they've been through the last month of the season. I think it's a combination of the Lakers defense being really stout and connected. And playing on the road, it was a hard environment. You were there. I mean, like,
it was. I mean, when it gets so loud, and I just. It's just so crazy. They have to concentrate. One of the things that bothers me, especially last night, I had this thing. I remember I actually was chatting with Finch a few weeks ago when he was in LA, and I'm a big Finchy fan. I agree with you. I think we're lucky to have him. I said I always liked. There used to be this series when Chauncey Billups and Carmelo were in Denver and they played the Lakers in Kobe, and it was a really tight series, and nobody could score at the end. And Chauncey would drive. And just try to get a foul, like manufacture points at the free throw line. And we only had there were only 2 team fouls against the Lakers. We couldn't get to the penalty, even if we tried. Because I think drive and initiate contact and see if you can get, manufacture some points, because it happens. I've seen it with good teams. I've seen it with the Wolves where the offense just gets shut down in the fourth. And I think you got to manufacture points at the free throw line. But the Lakers played good D. And I thought I didn't think the Lakers offense was very good. I thought our D was good, but the Lakers defense is good.
Well, I think one of the things that makes it tough to play against is all the switching that goes on. So, and so Finch is always, guarding against the ball getting sticky. He wants the ball to move. He doesn't want guys. I think that when you play against switching concept, I think getting into isolation basketball is difficult unless you have the talent of Anthony Edwards. And let me tell you too, I think that the spill that he took in the fourth quarter impacted him.
Absolutely. Well, yeah,
that was one of the things that I thought really impacted the game, because he flipped over the top of that Lakers player and basically fell on his back and shoulder and neck area. And I think that he wasn't quite the same after that. So, it's just, Mike Conley, I thought, played one of the best games that he's played as a Timberwolves player. Like, how clutch was he? For Mike to have, what did he have? 23 points on 11 shots. He hit 6 threes in that game. So, Mike did his job. I thought, Kyle Anderson, who's been one of the best additions. I think if you're thinking about like who could be MVP of this team this year for what Kyle's done, I know you're a big fan of Kyle's. Kyle had 13 assists in the game. So,
oh my gosh,
they just needed another shooter. Torian, I thought, played well. They just needed a little bit more depth. And I think the switching was the main thing that kind of bogged them down a lot. The Lakers' ability to switch and guard was what made it difficult in the fourth quarter.
So I have a couple questions here on specifics. Let's just go with Ant. The big picture of Ant. We're pretty blessed to have him. How good is he, and what's the ceiling with Anthony Edwards?
I don't know that there is a ceiling, because, since Ant has come on the scene, there have been so many situations where, and I know Michael and I kind of guard against talking about Jordan-esque sort of moments with him, but he does.
I love when you say that. You go, that was Jordan-esque. We're not saying he's Michael Jordan, but that was Jordan-esque. I love how you guys quickly, you got to be careful.
Yeah, well, people misconstrue what you mean, but I'm saying, like, I played against Jordan. I came in the league with Jordan. I watched Jordan his entire career and played against him for 8 years of it. And so I know what it looks like. And Anthony Edwards, he had a putback in the game against New Orleans. That's when I said it, is he had this putback that Taurean Prince had missed a layup in transition, and Ant came out of nowhere and was able to lay that thing in. The block he had, end of game situation against New Orleans, was very Jordan-esque. I mean, that's basically saving the game, and then him going down and getting that steal, like after Mike got the steal and got it to him, he gets that and one situation. So he does all these things all the time. And you know what, Craig? The greatest thing about Ant isn't really, he obviously his athleticism and the way that he plays the game, but it's the way that he approaches the game. The fact that he's coachable, the fact that he has like this incredible infectious personality that everybody's attracted to, loves him. Yeah. I think that's what makes me really, really grateful that he's on our team. The fact that he wants to be great, that the fact that he is great, the fact that he's not, because he's great, he's not too big to have people come and tell him and talk to him. He accepts information. I think that's why he's really resonating with Mike Conley, because Mike he's one of those guys that walks softly, but he carries a big stick. Mike doesn't say much, but when he does say something, it carries a lot of weight. And I think that because Mike is like that, it's even better for Ant. And so I just say he wants to be great. He works at his craft. It's one of the things that, when you juxtapose what Ant is versus what Andrew Wiggins was, because I think one of the frustrating things, not all first round picks or first picks of the draft are created equal. And so the thing about Wiggins that was both great and frustrating is Andrew was a freak athlete just like Ant is. Andrew is incredibly athletic, but Andrew's personality is more. He would rather not be interviewed. If no one interviewed him all season long, he would be ecstatic about that.
Yep.
He didn't really know how to carry a team, nor did he really want to. I think where he's at now at Golden State, you see what a valuable player Andrew Wiggins is. He's exactly where he needs to be, and he's flourishing in that role. But with Ant, there's no moment that's too big for him, you know? And so that's what this franchise needed. They needed a superstar player who's not afraid of the moment, that is coachable, that is like fan friendly, like the fans love him because he's so affable and funny. So he really is the perfect storm for a franchise that would have difficulty getting a player like that in free agency.
Yeah, and he knows who ARod is now, which is good. He didn't initially know who ARod was. That was I love how he was touching his hair. He's going, who's that? I don't follow baseball. No, his personality is great. And by the way, when he is in the regular season, when I'm watching him hit mid-range shots over people, I'm saying that's Jordan like myself. I mean, he's very gifted. He had an awful game last night, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens Friday. I kind of believe in this team. I just think that they've had so many good wins, and I love that they play team defense, which has eluded the Wolves for so long. So I really like this team. And last night, I actually in the second half, I sat next to Glenn and Becky Taylor, and I told Becky I want to try some of the lasagna one day, and she says, absolutely. But I also said, I don't know if they cared, but I just said, listen, we're going to be good for the next 5 to 7 years. This is a special time. And I think it's because of Ant and Jaden and Kat. And I want to now transition to Kat. I know he's quirky. I know he bothers some people. What are your thoughts on Kat? And specifically, can he learn not to kick his leg out and do some of the silly fouls? Can he and not whine? I mean, can he change, or is that who he is?
It's a great question. I know they coach him up and they talk to him. So I think that's something that's being done on a daily basis. They go through the files with him. He watches the video. So, some of it you have to accept and some of it may never change. So you have to accept some of that because he does a lot of things that's pretty great. What I would say about Ken, because people ask me about Carl a lot. And so here's being from Minnesota, Craig, and Midwesterners and Minnesotans in particular. We always kind of feel like we have to sell where we live. Like California kind of sells itself, and these beautiful areas kind of sell themselves. But being from the frozen tundra, I was sitting with Kevin Love's girlfriend at the time, who was an LA actress. That we were in the media room in Atlanta, and she sits down and she's talking to me. She goes, "Jim, I mean this sincerely. Why do people live in Minnesota?" She said that to me. And so I was like, well, I mean, like, so we had the conversation about it. But I say that because there are Timberwolves players that have come down the road that when they love Minnesota and they love playing for the franchise and they embrace the city and that doesn't always happen because trust me, if you talk to our trainers over the years, there's a lot of complaining going on about the snow lasting for 5 months out of the year and the weather. There's a lot of complaining going on in the training room in the mornings when they're getting ready to do a practice. Yeah. When guys stay year round and they get to see the whole 365 days and they get to see the beauty of the renewal of spring and the beauty of the summer and the lakes and stuff, and they see the change in the fall. If they only are there from training camp starting in October to when the season ends in April or May, you don't fully get the whole experience. Yeah. And so there have been players, Kevin Garnett understood it and loved it. I always loved Kevin Garnett for that. Kevin embraced Minnesota and loved Minnesota. Ricky Rubio loved Minnesota and always and talked about loving Minnesota. Why I love Karl Anthony Towns is because he loves Minnesota and hasn't tried to get out, hasn't tried to leave. And so I think that makes them special in my eyes. So when players come here and they love it, and it's like, I think that people in Utah would say the same thing. You know, players that love playing in Utah and playing for the Jazz and they end up staying there, those people become special in your heart as fans.
Yeah.
And so for me, one reason why I'll always love Ticket, Ricky, and Carl is because they love Minnesota and they want to be here. And so that makes a big difference. And Ant's in that category too, by the way. And there are other players too. I'm not naming them all, but that's a big thing for me when I start talking about some of my favorite players all time.
And that's a big thing because I remember when KG was there, they had trouble getting free agents up there, and it's just, it's a cold market. And I love it when the superstars, like you mentioned, are good staying there. I really like that. Do you think ARod and Mark Laurie kind of raise the significance of the franchise? Because I do. And helps, get free agents to come there now. What do you think of ARod and Mark Laurie now as minority owners?
I think that free agents are hard to get in a lot of different markets. I mean, obviously the coasts have a lot of pull, but think about how great an owner Mark Cuban is.
Yeah.
How many free agents have the Dallas Mavericks gotten over the years? I don't know that they've gotten any big free agents to come in there and play in Dallas. And that's a great market, a great city, great weather, incredible arena, great history, playing with Dirk, all those years. Like if they didn't make moves to get players there, they weren't coming in free agency. So I just think it's difficult. But to your point, yes, I think that one of the things that Alex Rodriguez and Mark Laurie, they are, Finchie calls Anthony Edwards a home run hitter. Well, ARod is a literal home run hitter, and I think he's a business home run hitter, And I think that these guys want to hit home runs. Mark Laurie, these guys have a big vision, and they've got a plan. I think if they can, I think that one of the things that's absolutely necessary is that this franchise needs a new arena. Yeah. I think Target Center is a little bit outdated. They tried renovating it; it's fine. But I think that that they have a big vision like that. So I'm thinking that they're going to be exactly what this franchise needs. I mean, Glenn's been a great owner. He's been I know Glenn's taken some criticism over the years, Craig, but like I know where his heart is and I know where he's put his money. He's spent a lot of money.
Right.
And other people have kind of let him down in my estimation. So it's not always been Glenn's fault. So I think he gets a bad rap. But anyway, I just think that Laurie and ARod have been fantastic.
Yeah, so do I. Okay, I'm going to ask you one more hoop question. Then it's pressure on you, your top 5 movies of all time. We don't pass too much judgment on those. And then we do a quick Life Gorgeous quiz. You'll see that, you hear that. It's kind of easy questions, kind of fun. Let me ask you one more basketball question. Do you, because you have a good basketball mind, do you have access to the coaching staff, or is that something you think is out of bounds? Do you get to say things to them as far as advice or strategy, or you just keep to yourself on that?
I do talk about stuff with some of the assistant coaches. Finchie is very approachable when it comes to that stuff. The entire coaching staff is top notch. Mike Honore is one of the best assistant coaches that I've been around in terms of his attention to detail and also his willingness to help our broadcast out. I mean, have you seen his little breakdown he does?
He's great.
The fact that Mike is willing to do that kind of stuff and share coaches' information like that, I think it's very unique. When you watch League Pass around the NBA, you're not going to see too many coaches stand in front of a whiteboard and give you sort of like strategies of how they're going to guard stuff or how they're going to offensively try to exploit the other team's defense. So yeah, I know they do share information with me. Like when I ask them about how they're guarding stuff and what the opponent does, they do share information and it's really, really well received. And by the way, over the years, I mean, I've had access, I've had no access. I mean, like Rick Adelman kind of played it close to the vest. but Rick was a fantastic coach who was really, really smart and great. But like he wouldn't let us come to practice and shoot around. Tibbs, it was like it was an iron curtain around the team,
Right.
And so that's the weird thing about Tibbs is that like Tibbs is so affable and so great. Like if you were to, go have a beer with him, like it would be unbelievable. But like when it comes to like access to the team, like we couldn't go to practice or shoot around, and there was no sharing of information. So I've had it all different ways. Over 25 years, you're going to have a lot of sensibility. Flip Saunders would give me the scouting report. You know what I mean? Like I've had coaches like hand me the scouting report to the game, and then I've had zero access. So it's funny how coaches sensibilities come to bear, but you just sort of learn to accept it.
I got a funny Micah Norrie story. So a couple of weeks ago when they were playing the Lakers in the regular season, I was with John Krasinski and we said hi to, we said hi to Finchy and Micah Norrie. And I said, John, I'm going to say something. I'm not going to say it to Coach Finch. I'm going to say it when I meet Micah Norrie. And Krasinski was like, say it. That's hilarious. So I said, hey, Coach Finch, pleasure to meet you. Thanks for doing the pod. And I said hi to Micah Norrie. Nice meeting you. Feel free to double team Bradley Beal next time. Because do you remember when Bradley Beal went off in the fourth quarter at Target Center? And I was like, double team him, trap him, because the other guys are not nearly as hot as he is. Even if he hits the open man, they're not as hot. And they just laughed. They laughed because I was just having fun, but because I try not to be the armchair quarterback. And I agree with you. Finchy is tremendous, but that was fun. Let's transition, young man, to your top 5 movies of all time. Was it difficult for you to come up with the list? Because some people find it very daunting.
Well, I mean, it is daunting from the standpoint that I think if you were just to ask somebody, just stop in the street and say, hey, give me your top 5 movies, I think that would be a difficult thing to do. But you start putting it down on paper, you start really thinking about it, because I think it's a great question. And I think that people love this question. People love talking about it, and then they love thinking about it. And I just think it's impossible to come up with 5, because when you start thinking about your top 5 movies, it's like, what genre do you pick? Which actor do you?
I know.
Some
people do a comedy, some do a musical, but I do tell people, I know it's difficult. You can change it 5 minutes later, and then sometimes people will give an answer and they'll say, well, I really like this movie, but I'm going to say this. So they give you like 8 movies, but they say who their 5 are. But I'm excited.
So quick, do you accept being able to, instead of saying one movie, could I say a director's group of movies?
We call that cheating. That's called cheating. You don't play for the Houston Astros or the New England Patriots. No, I'm just kidding. No, do you have 5, or what do you think?
I mean, I do have 5, but it's I'm leaving some out that I really feel bad about leaving out. And this is like trying to pick your top 10 players of all time. I mean, you're going to have to leave somebody great out of the mix, whether it's Bird or Magic or somebody.
I like how serious you're taking this. This is good.
Well, I just thought Finchy was like, he didn't really know, like, what do you, I remember when you
he did 4. And then one of the writers, I saw a tweet, they said, well, Finchy's more of a reader. He could have named 100 books. I don't know if that's true, but they said he's more of a reader. But anyways, go ahead, man.
Okay.
No particular order.
I'm going Godfather 2 is number 1 in my list. I mean, it's number 1 for a lot of people, and obviously 2 is better than 1. And I don't even talk about 3, but 2 is one of the best movies of all time. And I always kind of debate between Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill 1 and 2. Because like even in that genre, because I think that every time I see Pulp Fiction, I got to stop and watch it. That's one of the things I when I'm making my list is when I flip past it, if it's on, will I stay and watch it? So I don't care where I'm at in Pulp Fiction. I'm going to stop and watch. I'm going to stop and watch it. But Did you like the Kill Bill 1 and 2? Did you enjoy the movies?
It's interesting you say that, because I always like to hear if there's an overlap. So obviously Godfather 2 is a tremendous pick, and it's, the AFI list, it's there in the top 3 or somewhere. I can't remember. Maybe Godfather's, they have it ahead of that. But I like Tarantino, but I wasn't, the violence threw me off. And I always tell people the underrated one for Tarantino that I liked was Jackie Brown. I really liked that film. And then a lot of people like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. They're going crazy over it. And I liked it. And I liked that there was that surprise ending. So I guess you definitely like Pulp Fiction. Too. What's that? Say again?
People, Reservoir Dogs too.
Yeah. So I would say you like Pulp Fiction more than I do, but I'm going to revisit it.
Yeah, I just think that, Ving Rhames was great. Samuel Jackson was great. John Travolta revitalized his career. Like, I just think it was, Uma Thurman was fantastic. There was just so many great performances, and Bruce Willis was great. I'm going to kind of go off the beaten path, because I don't know how you feel about this movie, but I love, in my top 5, the movie Network. Did you see the movie Network?
That is unreal. People should see that. I mean, it is. That's a great choice. That's a great one. That's a really good one. Because I honestly don't know. It offends people that I haven't seen certain movies. I don't think I've seen Broadcast News, and I don't really care. But Network is amazing. That's a great film.
Yeah,
that's good.
Faye Dunaway, William Holden is just a Ned Beatty, and there's so many iconic scenes in that movie. How about all the Bourne movies, like Bourne Identity? Like, I'm a Jason Bourne fan. I think that all of them, they're absolutely watchable. And then I got to put a comedy in there. So I got to put Caddyshack in.
That's good. That's good. People love that.
I got to put a golf movie in there, and I got to put a comedy in there. And like, for me, Caddyshack is got to be in my top 5, just because I just think that the way that Rodney Dangerfield took over Chevy Chase was fantastic.
Right.
Some great performances in that movie as well. I don't know, is that 5?
That's 5. That's a very good list.
And Caddyshack. But I mean, it's a great question. It's a great debate.
I just want to say something about the Bourne movies. So as I've gotten older, I just really like espionage, and I like action, and the Bourne movies are tremendous. I also like, and they're different than, obviously, Daniel Craig as Bond. I've always been a Bond fan, but Bourne is more intense. There's zero humor in Bourne, and I love it. And I also like the Mission Impossible Tom Cruise movies. So I really like the Bourne movies. That's a great choice. I used to put a comedy in my list, it was from 1983, called Tootsie. I really like Tootsie. And now I have my 4 movies. A lot of my movies are classic Hitchcock movies and stuff, and Chinatown. But I like Sideways, which I don't know if it's a top 5 movie, but I find it, I rewatched it a few years ago, and I went, whoa. So I rotate my list, and you can do that as well.
Okay, can I rotate again right now? Because I'll just pick all Coen Brother movies.
Oh,
because they're from.
Wait a second. I want to think of my favorite. I like True Grit. But what's the one? Is it No Country for Old Men? Is that the one?
Country for Old Men.
That's a great one, right?
It's really spooky and dark, but I think that the Raising Arizona was the first one that I remember seeing.
Yeah.
Nick Cage was great in that.
Right.
But between Raising Arizona and Fargo, which was huge too, that was a huge movie when it came out. Right. I mean,
were you offended by the exaggeration of the Minnesota accent?
A little bit. I mean, it's so funny. Our sideline reporter, Katie Storm, she can do that Minnesota accent like to the 9th, 10th degree. And I've been asking her to can you just please do the coach's interview in the Minnesota accent that she can do. She won't do it. I'm going to get her to do it at some point. But yeah, I mean, that's that movie Fargo, man, that really kind of made that accent kind of really popular.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, it is time to wrap up with the Life Gorgeous quiz. Simple questions, profound insights. Do you, sir, have a favorite restaurant on the road? You guys travel for the NBA, for the Wolves? Do you have a favorite restaurant on the road?
I have two that I really like. One of them you probably have been to. Have you been to the Beverly Grill?
Yes. Yeah. Right near the hotel there. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one.
I really enjoy the Beverly Grill. It's always fun whenever we go in there. Saw Cindy Crawford last time I was there. It was one of my, I didn't go up and talk to her. I wasn't going to chat with her, but she's one of my, that's one of my stars that I would always want to meet. I'd never met her before. So I really, I was kind of starstruck for the first time. And then the other one is a place called Willie G's in Houston, Texas. So Willie G's, Tillman Fertitta, who owns the Rockets, he made his money in the restaurant business, among other things. But so when I played for the Rockets in 1984, I lived right across the street from the original Willie G's, and that one's since burned down, and they built it again, and they changed places, but it's by the new hotel that they built, the Post Oak Hotel that we all stay at now. Okay. And the new Willie G's is right in the same sort of complex. Tillman built this incredible complex in Houston. If you ever go to Houston, you should go to a game there at some point. You got to go stay at the Post Oak, and then there's Mastro's there. There's Willie G's is there, but it's Cajun seafood. And I always said, man, if I get one last meal, that's where I'm going for my last meal. I'm going to Willie G's.
That's great. I was going to ask you what kind of food it was. Cajun seafood. That's tremendous. What is your answer when people ask you Jordan versus LeBron? What is your answer?
Jordan.
Yeah. I agree. I say Jordan 1A, LeBron 1B, but I just try to make people feel good. But I don't think I don't know what it is. He was competitive, but he was a much better shooter. And I'm still a little surprised. Like, the joke is that Bronny, his son, has a better form than LeBron on his jump shot. I mean, I heard Rick Barry a few years ago say, just tuck your elbow, LeBron, tuck your elbow a little bit. But obviously LeBron is amazing, but Jordan is the best, correct?
I just feel like that there's never been someone that's been so universally respected. Mm-hmm. I think that Michael Jordan is like Muhammad Ali. Like, there may have been better boxers, technically better or whatever, than Muhammad Ali, but like, just think about the kind of respect that Ali would get across the board. Yep. And so I don't know that you can get that from a lot of other boxers. I mean, Mike Tyson's had his ups and downs or whatever, but all these great boxers have come down. But with Jordan, I think that everybody that played against him, that watched him play from that whole time frame, I just have incredible respect for him. And I think you could get a lot of detractors about LeBron James. Obviously there's people that respect him, don't respect him. Obviously you got to respect the talent and what he's done. But I just think that for me, Michael Jordan was the most complete player on both ends of the floor, and his volume of work. I mean, leading the league in scoring. What did he lead the league 8 times or whatever? I mean, his body of work speaks for itself.
We're going to go deep here. Chocolate shake versus vanilla shake.
Is it? Where am I getting it from?
Oh, that's a great question. I think we're talking universally. When you go to a place you haven't been, and you just say you have a choice. What do you prefer, chocolate or vanilla shake?
Can I tell you something? I'm picking strawberry. If there's chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, I'm going strawberry. That's really what my choice is. I wouldn't order chocolate or vanilla. I would order strawberry.
So funny. I did the favorite pie question to Ian Eagle, and he goes, I don't like pie. I don't like pie, Craig. Oh, I go, you don't have a sweet tooth? He goes, no, I have a sweet tooth. I go, what, gummy bears? He goes, yeah, that kind of stuff, like candy. It was so embarrassing. But I tell you why I like that. I like strawberry. I actually like strawberry more than chocolate. So I just want to see if people know the nuances of vanilla are so great. I prefer vanilla. Chocolate can be overpowering. but strawberry, I like that. And you have that freedom. If you would have said a pineapple shake, I would have said, no, we can't accept that. And finally, who is your favorite Minnesota Viking of all time? We grew up in Minnesota. It's a Viking state, even though it's a hockey state, and even though the NBA, the basketball, but the Vikings kind of rule. Who's your favorite Viking of all time? Do you have one?
We were just talking about this because I went to a Vikings game this year, and my brother and I were there. We were at the Cowboys game. Do you remember that game?
Wait a second. Oh, no, that was terrible. That was awful. That was awful.
It was an awful game. We just got run out of the stadium.
Yeah.
And, I know that we stayed for as long as we could. I didn't leave until the fourth quarter because I was, never what's going to happen. Think about what happened with the Colts. I mean, like the Colts game was the most incredible comeback of all time. So I thought that could have happened, but we were sitting there talking about what jersey. I'm not a jersey purchaser. Like I wouldn't. I mean, when you play in pro sports, it's difficult to be a fan like you were when you were a kid.
Right.
But at a Vikings game, I think I would buy a jersey, and I do need to do that because I want to wear one to a game. And if I was to do that, I would buy Carl Eller's jersey. I love
nice.
Carl Eller.
I love that. Yeah.
I love number 81.
81.
And hey, Craig. Like I growing up, like when we still remembered phone numbers because like now we have smartphones. I don't remember anybody's number except for my wife's and my own. I used to remember phone numbers by using Vikings jerseys. I just 10 was Fran Tarkenton, 44 was Chuck Foreman, 88 was Alan Page. So I just be like, okay, Alan Page, Chuck Foreman. It's like, and so Viking jersey numbers were a big part of my childhood. I loved the Minnesota Vikings.
What number was Matt Blair?
59.
Correct. So my favorite player was Chuck Foreman. I remember he was on Monday Night Football, and Frank Gifford called him like the Plastic Man because he would spin and do all this kind of stuff. And then I liked Anthony Carter.
81.
And then I liked Diggsy. And now I like the Hitman, Harrison Smith. He's pretty special. But
I was thinking about getting a Smith jersey. I think he's another guy that I really admire too. Do you have a Vikings jersey?
No, I have. I'm kind of like you. I don't care about autographs or memorabilia, but I did get gifts when I did the show. So I have in my den here. I have a Dennis Green signed football, a Vikings football, and it has the NFC. It has the times that they won the NFC North on there, and it's right over here. But and I have jerseys from ball players, including NBA ball players, like when the Sixers were playing the Lakers with Allen Iverson against Kobe. I had the Sixers sent me a jersey, but I think it might have been my name on the back or something. I have a bunch of jerseys, Kevin Love jerseys. I don't know if I should sell them or just they're in the garage somewhere. So I'm not a big memorabilia guy,
Well, I'm kind of disappointed we didn't get to talk about your Montana State run.
Are you making fun of me? Are you making fun of me?
Well, no. I mean, I think more than anything else, just because of our guy Stu Starner. And, Stu was a coach at the University of Minnesota when I was there, and also the fact that you broadcasted the Timberwolves game. I mean, you didn't talk about that with Grady or with me. The fact that we'll
do it next time because I'm going to be doing this a long time, and we'll have you guys back, and we'll talk about that. I do remember doing a Wolves game on radio, and I pulled a Kevin Harlan. And it was a putback dunk by Cherokee Parks. And I said, Cherokee Parks is a god, something like that. But thank you, sir. It's great to see you. I hope I might even see you next week if the Wolves make the playoffs. I might have to come in. Our friend Charlie Swanson is pressuring me to come in. But
Charlie's the greatest. Yeah, we didn't talk about Charlie either, who's he's absolutely the greatest dude, man. You picked a good one with him. How'd you meet Charlie Swanson, by the way?
Oh, I meet people through Instagram, and Minnesota people are so nice to me. And what I find fascinating is, and I want to see this, but Charlie has a Rolls Royce, and I want to see him drive around in the snow in a Rolls Royce, and I haven't seen that yet, but that's funny. But anyways, we'll see you again, sir. I appreciate you doing it.
Okay, Craig. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our show. We'll see you next time. And remember, young people, I'm proud of you.